Let me welcome you, everybody, to Layer 7's webinar on how to choose the right API management solution for your needs. My name is Dana Crane, and I'm the product manager for Layer 7's API portal solution. And I have with me today Jamie Ryan.
Hey, folks. Welcome.
Okay, let's just advance here and talk a little bit about some housekeeping issues we're going to need to get done. So just up front, we're going to need to definitely want you guys to put in your questions into our chat window. As we're going through the webinar, just enter anything that comes to mind, and we'll get back to them at the end of the webinar. Or if you prefer, you can just tweet them to #L7webinar. Like I said, we'll cover those at the end of the session today. And if we run out of time, we'll just follow up afterwards with a direct email to you. So with that, let's get started. So a little bit of background introduction first on how Layer 7 sees the API market evolving. So Layer 7 has deep roots in the SOA world where SOAP services, despite their complexity, they've added tremendous value to the enterprise over the past decade. And especially when it comes to initiatives like system integration or information sharing, SOAP services has been key. But today, REST-based APIs offer even more opportunities. They allow enterprises to really create new businesses or innovate around new existing business models, or have even helped kickstart the whole BYOD, the bring your own device initiative. And because they're much easier to implement and understand, APIs are proven to be even more of a catalyst for innovation than SOAP services ever were in the enterprise. That's had some results. So, while SOAP was initially only adopted by governments and large enterprises, and really only used within those organizations, APIs are becoming far more ubiquitous. They're presenting opportunities for forward-thinking companies to reach new audiences and even adopt new channels or embrace emerging platforms. And as a result, what you see is that the enterprise is disappearing. More and more external entities are becoming critical providers of information, critical providers of functionality and interaction for that enterprise. And while traditional constituents like partners and developers, they are being impacted, the real key drivers here are mobile and cloud initiatives, though. That's what's forcing companies to rethink where, how, and exactly what is being shared. So traditionally, addressing all of those constituents would require a large investment across a number of initiatives. You can see here, diverse technology sourced from a bunch of multiple vendors. All of that can get very, very expensive in terms of time and money and resources. But if you've got the right API management solution in place, all of those initiatives can be addressed by a single solution that covers the 4 basic common requirements. You can see them here: identity and access control, developer and partner management, managing the interface to your applications, and traditional tech ops functionality. So let me at this point pass the baton to Jamie and get him to delve in a little more depth on these key cornerstones. Jamie?
Thank you, Dan. So we're going to talk a bit about each of these and then talk about some customer use cases. So we'll start with identity management and access control, because this is really central to any API strategy. We need to know who can access what information and when, and there are many more identities involved with external APIs, especially in a mobile context, than in a traditional enterprise application that's being exposed internally through some SOAP service. We need to be aware of and be able to make policy decisions on API keys that might represent a developer application, user credentials provided via OAuth that might provide some indication of access to particular data or particular application, even device IDs or multi-factor authentication mechanisms based on, say, an SMS that you receive on your phone, a smart ID that you carry around, or a key fob with a one-time token. Those might combine to allow a more sophisticated access policy. So the single solution also needs to provide standards-based access control for internal users. So that might mean bridging an OAuth token that you get from some user credentials to SAML or some other internal enterprise standard. You need the flexibility to support both, as well as new standards, such as OpenID Connect, which is essentially a corollary to SAML in the API world to retrieve more information about a user, and social login, which allows you to enable developers who already have accounts on development platforms such as GitHub or Google Apps. And this flexibility is critical. So let's talk about flexibility and extensibility. Support of multiple identity management systems that already exist in your enterprise, such as SiteMinder, Active Directory, Oracle Access Manager, etc., and the ability to expose those systems and translate their tokens into an extended mobile world. That's just one example of the flexibility required by a comprehensive API management platform. It also needs to have some sort of plugin framework that allows for the addition of new identity providers, new transports, and new token types, so you aren't left flat-footed when the next big thing comes along. Like UMA, User Managed Access, which is trying to be the third leg of identity management, along with OAuth and OpenID Connect, or SCIM, S-C-I-M, which is the system for cross-domain identity management. Started out as a standard for cloud identity and has since kind of expanded its scope. The solution should also offer general extensibility through one or more programming languages, so Java SDK, for instance, in case there's enterprise-specific code that needs to be incorporated into the functionality of the platform. So if you need to define your own functionality to be incorporated into your existing policies. And it should have broad product management APIs to allow operational management, extraction of data, dynamic policy generation. So Dana, do you want to talk about how sensitivity to identity and access control affected one of our customers' mobility projects?
Yeah, let's talk about a use case, make this a little more real. So, let's talk a little bit about Amerigroup and their access control issues. So, Amerigroup is a US-based Fortune 500 healthcare insurance company. They used to send out workers to bedridden customers, but those workers were only armed with a paper and pencil in order to update those customers' records. To overcome that process, which was both slow and, error-prone because it's all based on paper-based records that we have to type back into the computer when they got back to the office, what Amerigroup decided to do was actually build an iPad application, and then they armed those mobile workers with it. So the goal was for the application to call home over public networks, keep costs down over public networks, and update Amerigroup's back-end system of records via APIs. But that introduced a bunch of problems for the IT team, including things like, the sensitive nature of that data. Of course, they'd have to comply with all the HIPAA regulations because this is an insurance company and that is sensitive information about the patient. And IT felt at that time that introducing a VPN would just be too prone to user error. So what they were looking for was something a little bit different, and that's where Layer 7 came in. We gave Amerigroup the ability to address those security and compliance issues via the policy mechanism we deliver on our gateway. But more than just that, they needed better granular access controls. They didn't want people just to validate against their LDAP, which of course they did, but they wanted to ensure that they could understand that the application that was calling back into the organization was a valid application, in fact, the application that they'd handed out to their mobile workers. And of course, we needed the flexibility to have that whole solution integrated with their existing IT environment, including their existing ESB, in order to reach those back-end services and update that information. So packaged all together, this was a key requirement for getting Amerigroup's mobile access initiative off the ground. Jamie, you want to talk further about developers and partners?
Sure. So we've talked about identity. Now let's talk about developer and partner management. So our enterprise customers have a number of different business models that they're exposing these APIs for. Lots of different exposure styles, ranging from open APIs with public developers to partner developers creating enterprise mobile applications for either internal use, like Amerigroup, or for external use, like some of the ones we'll talk about later, to private internal developers within the enterprise itself, so entirely internal. Even hybrid programs where you need to differentiate between some public APIs and some private APIs that you're exposing over the same portal. So it's pretty common in today's environment. You need that level of fine-grained control. Also, with the frequency of mergers and acquisitions and siloed internal departments, you need support for multiple business units, with each business unit being able to manage their own APIs separately to greatly lower that IT overhead, management, and resource costs across the enterprise. So once you've chosen your API business model, you need to expose information about those APIs and distribute access to those APIs for the appropriate audience. So this goes far beyond simple API key distribution and token management, though those are very important. There also needs to be a focus on administration. So approval workflows for common tasks like registration, clearly described SLAs and monetization opportunities. So if you want to place a price on a certain API, you need to be able to do that, but also restrict the number of times that API is called, depending on how much they're paying. And after-the-fact analytics for both the developers building the applications so they can see how those apps are running and how their API calls are going, and the API owners themselves so they can see which developers are producing the most value, which APIs are being used, so they can decide how to reinvest when it comes time to add new APIs. There also needs to be a focus on usability, so a variety of documentation styles, including inline interactive documentation. It helps to have an API explorer for trying out real-life test endpoints and seeing live data come back. And then open lines of communication from the API publisher to the API consumer through notifications on the portal, through blogs, through message forums where people can communicate together. Next slide. So obviously the goal of any API program is going to be usage of those APIs by the intended audience for the intended purpose. Next slide, Dana. So that's going to mean significant and increasing volume of API traffic. That means your API management platform needs to optimize for performance and scalability. So you need acceleration, not just in hardware, but also in software. You need the ability to cluster and scale your policy enforcement points. They might be distributed around the world, and they need to scale along with the traffic being generated by these new applications. You also need true failover for mission-critical business. We're talking about things that people are actually building their business on, these APIs, and so you need to make sure they're stable. And the ability to manage and prioritize traffic based on content, based on the identity of the user accessing it, or based on that service level that you've decided on when you're defining your monetization and SLAs. So Dana, do you want to talk about a customer that needed this sort of scalability due to the success of their API program?
Yeah, we've got a great example here, Alaska Airlines. So Alaska Airlines is a large and growing U.S. national airline. They handle about 20 million passengers annually, but they had a problem. Their original iPhone application was basically just a screen scrape of a mainframe application. And, you know, understandably, it was getting some pretty bad reviews on iTunes. What they really needed was to quickly onboard a partner, an iOS development partner, in fact, to help them create a more usable iPhone application. You can see a screenshot of it down there in the bottom. But that initiative was also adopted by internal developers. So not only getting those partners on board, but the internal developers who were exposed to these APIs suddenly started brainstorming a bunch of ideas, and they resulted in a couple of really unique applications. One of them was their cargo tracking app, which was, you know, plug in your tracking numbers and it sends it down to the back end. You receive an SMS showing you all the details about that package and its current location. But uniquely, there's a Facebook application that those internal developers also created called Flying Social. So if you log into Facebook and go off to Flying Social, you'll see all of your Facebook friends plotted on a map. And if you click on any of those friends, what you get is a little pop-up that tells you how much it costs you to fly with Alaska Air today to go and visit those friends. That's something really unique for them. Now, all of this stuff was getting some really good user adoption out there. You know, their iPhone app went from, I think, 1 star to 4 star now. So it's driving a lot of access to that back end. And those back end APIs are starting to get stressed out. Much of that is handled by the Layer 7 gateway and some of the, you know, out-of-the-box capabilities that Jamie was talking about. But, you know, uniquely, that iPhone app has resulted in some real scaling needs. And, you know, typically what happens with that iPhone app is you're a flyer. As you get closer to the airport, you want to confirm your flight, make sure you're on board, check in as possible, and then make sure that it's not delayed. So what Alaska Air was finding is that, as people get in the taxi, as they get close to the airport, as they get into the lobby of the airport, they keep rechecking their phone application to make sure that their flights are on time and the gate hasn't changed on them. And so all that information requires them to call that back-end Sabre API, and that costs them money. Every time they hit that Sabre API, costs Alaska Air. So to effectively scale up and control those costs, what we needed to do was use some of that caching capability that Layer 7 offers them to provide a good, unique mix of hitting that back end and get the most relevant data, but not too often that we maximize the charges. So I think that's something that Jamie's going to talk about in our next slide, all around our caching capabilities. Jamie?
That's right. Caching is just one of the many features that an API management solution needs to provide at runtime, so on the interface for the application itself. So as request and response messages traverse the platform, policy enforcement is required for everything from data validation to orchestration of multiple back-end services, composition of various different message formats, so you need to be able to transform those message formats, to protocol mediation. You might be connecting to MQ or JMS or even a CLI command on the back end and exposing a nice RESTful API. Threat protection is also important. So this runtime enforcement is critical to protect your enterprise data and application assets that previously have been exposed only internally or to a select group of very carefully governed partners through some SOA initiative. And primary among these is security. So security is obviously a broad term. It includes privacy, encryption, integrities through digital signatures or other types of signatures, threat protection, and more. So fortunately, there are certifications for products like ours that have gone through the rigorous process of security reviews, penetration testing, auditing by security standards bodies, sometimes U.S. governmental bodies. So Common Criteria and FIPS are two of the most respected certification authorities. They validate our handling of private keys and other sensitive materials. We have an onboard PKI infrastructure, including a full WS Trust security token service, so we can act as a certificate authority. We can respond with tokens to an STS request. And we support both embedded and external hardware security modules. So if you need hardware-based key management, we can do that as well. And that often happens in the payment industries or in the government and military use cases. So we support standards like XACML for authorization, policy-based authorization, and the full WS Star stack for SOAP-based security. And we have specific industry certifications like PCI compliance for the payment industry, state vulnerability testing certifications for the U.S. military. But interface management, security is very important, but interface management entails quite a bit more than just security. So, Dana, do you want to talk about some of the mediation and orchestration aspects?
Yeah. A good example here is one of our customers who's a leading global publisher. They do scientific magazines, they do medical journals, that sort of thing. And they had traditionally exposed those databases of information via SOAP services, out to their basically a scholarly audience, mostly university professors and researchers. Those guys, they had to download dedicated applications to do their research. And you can imagine downloading those applications to query a journal like Nature and then having to download another application to go ahead and query a journal like Science. That's not exactly a great user experience, and not surprisingly, they were getting some pretty bad user satisfaction scores out of their SAT surveys. In fact, those satisfaction surveys gave them a clue as to what was going on. The researchers really told them what we want to do is we want to use our own applications. We don't want to use your canned applications. And our application of choice is really Google Apps. That's what we use to access and do all of our collation and do all of our reporting in. So what we really like to do is be able to use that Google Apps to query all of those scientific journals we're interested in. Query them all, pull back all that information, assimilate it all, and do our research on the fly using exactly the tools that we want, not the stuff that you're imposing on us. So that's the problem they came to Layer 7 with. And they said, how can you help us with that problem? And we went to them, we said, sure, no problem. We have the ability out of the box to transform your existing SOAP APIs into REST APIs, so do a little bit of transformation under the hood. And that allows them to more easily communicate directly with the Google Apps that their researchers want to use, but we also allowed them to do some orchestration within our Layer 7 solution as well. So that allows them to query across all those databases of information, gets those researchers to submit basically a single query, and then aggregate all that returned information at once, rather than having to query each of those sources of information one at a time. And that has significantly increased that researcher productivity and has resulted in much better satisfaction scores as a result as well. Back to you, Jamie.
Sure. So we've talked about 3 of the 4 pillars of API management, and now we're going to talk about operations management. So our enterprise customers already have existing operation systems. They've got monitoring tools, they've got things to do health checks, they have logging infrastructure, they have reporting tools, they might have security event correlation tools, and they already have their build and deploy processes figured out for services, for APIs, and they want to integrate with those existing systems. So that's what your API management solution should be able to do. Integrate with those existing systems, as well as providing a centralized point for API and policy lifecycle management. So you should be able to migrate policies from one environment to another, accounting for environmental dependencies. So if you've got a particular LDAP repository in dev that changes in test or staging or production, you should be able to create those mappings and then have it automatically mapped during environment promotion. If you are going to a particular queue name or host name, those should change as well. You should be able to create workflow around versioning. So as you version your APIs and then eventually deprecate those APIs, those notifications need to go out to all of the developers that are using them. They need to be prevented from adding those deprecated APIs to new applications. So you should be able to control that using workflow, built-in workflow. You should be able to generate reports or export usage information to either an external data warehouse, so you can put it in a star schema and then look at it from all different slices, or a big data analytics engine. So you might want to process all of the events that we process, all of the transactions that we process, and glean some additional information about your consumers from that big data. You should also be able to have global deployments across on-premise, cloud, and hybrid environments. So these operational concerns boil down to manageability, which we offer at several stages of your API and policy lifecycle. So during policy creation, as you're deciding who gets access and what sort of things you want to check for, look for in the content that's flowing through, how you want to transform those messages, different audiences can be given access to varying portions of the policy. So your security architects can focus just on the identity portion, and your application developers can actually focus on the transformations that are required and the connectivity that's required to the back-end systems. So we have an advanced role-based access control that allows that segmentation of concerns. When you're promoting services between environments, you should be able to easily move from dev to test, to production, to disaster recovery. You should be able to do that with the push of a button. You should be able to do that with a CLI command. You should be able to do that with a Python script or a JavaScript piece of code, or an integrated build and deploy process. So it makes it very easy to integrate it with your existing processes. Your API management solution should also be manageable from anywhere and across global deployments. So it should integrate with all the reporting, BI, analytics tools I talked about earlier, no matter where it sits. So Dana, do you want to talk about how centralizing these policy and operations tasks allows for value in a real-world use case?
Yeah, so the real-world use case here is U.S. Army Accessions Command. So, you know them probably as Army recruiting. These guys focus, as you might expect, on recruiting and the training of recruits. So after 9/11, the Army was mandated, like most federal services, to become less paper-driven and get more interoperable. But you know, the U.S. Army recruiter guys have this recruiting program that's based on a homegrown CRM system. It's got more than 100 components and more than 60 major APIs, and all of those would have to be updated to make them more interoperable. And also complicating things was the fact that Army's recruiting applications were tightly coupled to those existing services. Now, all that meant that the different applications, you know, you can see two of them here, the GoGuard website and the GoArmy iPhone app, all these different applications had to be updated on an ongoing basis as they updated those major services and components. And they couldn't obviously update all of them at the same time. So what you had was this chain of events that was really sucking up a lot of the resources and time from getting any new things done, just updating existing things. So they contacted Layer 7. We were brought in to help them. What we did was centralize that whole API security, API management, API lifecycle in a single policy-driven device. That gives you sort of a middle point and abstracts all those pieces of information away from those applications, allows you to effectively decouple the back end and the front end. And that gave them a lot of breathing space, gave them a lot of resources back. And you know, one of the key drivers they looked at next was because they need to support recruiters in those recruiting centers, you know, located literally around the world, one of the key benefits they could get out of this whole decentralization, this whole management in a centralized solution here, was the ability to better manage all of those multiple data centers and environments by taking advantage of some of Layer 7's abilities to centralize and programmatically update and migrate those APIs across all of those different centers. So as Damien was saying, on a worldwide basis, you can go ahead and migrate those things programmatically, greatly decreasing the risk associated with moving things about. So, you know, before we wrap up the whole abilities thing, I want to talk about one of the key abilities that people sometimes overlook, and that's deployability. So, you know, deployability is where you want to look, what you want to look for in a vendor, because they give you the flexibility to choose the different form factors or maybe different deployment models that better fit your budget and requirements. So, you know, for Layer 7's case, we support not only a number of different platforms you see here, but also we uniquely provide you with what we call our Freedom License. And that Freedom License allows you to freely move your production systems from, you know, for example, physical appliances to virtual appliances. There's a big move in IT nowadays from physical to virtual to cloud. As you move through those stages, as your IT infrastructure or strategy evolves, will allow you to move the software, the hardware, the solution that you buy from us along across those different form factors without incurring new costs or having to rebuy that infrastructure. So finally, I'd like to stress that, you know, an API initiative that you undertake, it's really a journey, it's not a destination. So what you need to look for is more than just good technology. What you need to look for from your vendor are things like, you know, global tech support, someone that can support you as you're in your enterprise model using a follow-the-sun capacity. So look for centers, you know, in North America and Europe and in Asia Pacific as well. And then when you actually use that tech support to call in an issue, you want to have the confidence that your vendor is going to be able to offer you some kind of rapid engineering services, turn around that problem, and give you a solution in a very timely manner. Obviously, you also need to look for professional services that can understand your requirements, translate them into a solution that's tailored for you. And one other thing we hear more and more these days is design assistance. So, you know, a lot of those traditional SOA customers that we've had or that we still encounter nowadays who are looking to revamp some of their initiative and make it more externalized. And for those guys, what they typically want to do is recast their existing or some of their existing SOA services as REST-based APIs. And then once they've done that, they want to be able to promote those new APIs. You know, be that at a hackathon, be that at a meetup, or, you know, some other venue to better foster and grow that adoption of their new API. And of course, you want to look for domain expertise as well. You want somebody with a proven track record to give you the confidence that you've hooked up with a vendor that you know can get that job done. So all of this is just to say that Layer 7, here at Layer 7, our own API management solution, we take a holistic view of the enterprise's needs. What we like to do is provide you with a single API management solution that can handle all of your partner needs, all of those developer access needs, your mobile, your cloud initiatives, all of those from a single platform. And that really allows you to gain control back over your IT infrastructure, allows you to control the cost and the resources that would normally be associated with a wide range of initiatives in your enterprise. So you'll all be receiving shortly an email that will give you access to a downloadable analyst report. In that analyst report, you'll find that Forrester has evaluated Layer 7 for our ability to manage APIs and has really ranked us pretty highly against a large number of vendors, in fact, a large number of very large vendors in this space. So I encourage you to go ahead and read through the details of that report and then follow up with us, because we'd love to be your API management of choice. So with that, I think we've come to just about the end, and we're going to take some questions now. So myself, Dana Crane, I'm the product manager. I'm pretty much talking to the business value of API management, talking about our products in general, and Jamie is more of a technology guy. So if you've got technology questions, that's probably where you want to direct your questions there. So just chat them into the chat window, and we should be able to get back to you. So just looking at some of the questions that are coming in. Here's one. What breakdown do you see between open APIs and private APIs? So, open APIs are really the whole initiative around how do I drive interaction and integration with external entities. So being able to offer an open API is really saying I'm exposing this API outside the organization to more than just partners. So, in the old days, in the SOAP days, we saw people governing very closely the partners that they allowed into the organization and exposing some of their services in a very restricted manner. Now with open APIs, what we're seeing is an initiative that really allows you to expose that API in a much more digestible, much more freely available way that really has a lot of product associated with it. So packaging it up to be more easily consumable. And that's really where you get the whole movement to rest, decreasing that complexity around SOAP services, providing you with a more simple interface that is easier to understand by developers, because when you expose those open APIs, what you're trying to do is get as many third-party developers, as many third-party devices or sites or what have you outside the enterprise to connect in, and be more ubiquitous, more freely available. That's what I see. Jamie, do you have an opinion there?
No, I think you're dead on. I think there's quite a bit of publicity out there for open APIs, but when you actually look at the enterprises that are doing this stuff, a lot of those are still what they call dark APIs that are either exposed but not publicized, or not exposed to external audiences as well. So we see quite a few. The majority of our customers are actually doing private APIs or putting them out there to select groups of partners that are helping them build their mobile applications.
Okay. We have another question from Luke Stokes. What do you think the future of OAuth 2.0 will be? That sounds like a good one for you, Jamie. Yeah,
so OAuth 2.0 is here to stay. So there has been some controversy even from the committee that was working on it, but really most people have selected it as the way to go. And even people that were working purely with OAuth 1.0 are now making the transition. And I think everybody's really accepted that it's here. It might be imperfect, but it's what people are going to move forward with. It's also going to be the basis for other things, like OpenID Connect is based on OAuth 2.0, and so you really need that as a framework to move forward. I think some benefits are It already integrates with some existing enterprise standards like SAML. There's a SAML extension for OAuth, so you can use that today, and we have that in place. I think what's really missing at this point is a really simple explanation that people can kind of take a look at and grasp exactly how to use OAuth 2.0 and how to build it into their application. So we're doing everything we can to make that easier. We have Layer 7 people speaking at conferences and blogging about OAuth all the time. And then we're trying to make it easier along with libraries for mobile applications to be built in so that it's easier to connect as a client because it does place a bit of a burden on the client. So we're doing everything we can, and we think the industry is definitely headed that direction.
Yeah, and from my point of view, talking to customers out there, OAuth 2.0 seems to be the way to go. A lot of people have moved off the OAuth 1 and moved on to OAuth 2. They're still having some issues trying to implement this thing right now, but it seems to be when you do an open API, this is what you want to do. This is the way that developers want to digest this. So we've got another question here. In an API or system that uses extensions to deliver content in different formats, such as XML or JSON, can a system like Layer 7 support different authorization or authentication requirements based on the extension? For example, not auth for HTML, but require auth for an XML or a JSON message. Jamie, sounds like your question again.
Yes, and the answer is absolutely. So our policy language is very flexible, and we have built-in workflow operations. So you can say, based on the format, whether it's .xml, .html, .json, or whether it's in the header, if you are putting it into an accepts header for application/JSON, we can branch basically our policy based on that. So for HTML, require one form of authentication, maybe basic auth. For .json or .xml, require some other form or a multiple forms. So you can do multi-factor, you can do one or the other, say look them up in LDAP if they're not there, look them up in some other source. But yes, our policy language is very flexible, and it's all kind of drag and drop to define your policies. Here's one for you, Dana. Can you talk a little bit about your pricing model and how it relates to the freedom to transfer between form factors?
Yeah, so we offer a number of different form factors and a number of different, I guess, basically models that you can choose from that really address the kinds of needs you want. So if you're looking for something basic like an API proxy to be implemented to proxy just your APIs and provide you with some OAuth coverage as well, that's sort of our base model. And then you can move up from there to an XML firewall, which does a lot more of the kinds of access control and granular restrictions around that Jamie was talking about. And then, up to our full-fledged product, our SOA Gateway, which provides you with a number of more advanced capabilities around the flexibility and extensibility that Jamie was talking about as well, and better integrate into your existing environment. So we have a number of tiers that you can come in at. When you come in at that tier, you can opt to purchase across a number of different form factors. So like I said, we make ourselves available in software as a hardware appliance. You can buy it as VMware. If you're moving to the cloud, you can get your license transferred to an AMI. So once you've established yourself, say on typically what our customers do is they'll start off with a physical appliance, and then their IT initiative may be to start up a private cloud, or perhaps to move out to a public cloud like an AWS sort of thing. Once they've done that and the IT has started to move their assets, they'll come back to us and ask, how do we get off of this hardware appliance and start using you in our private cloud? And that's very simple. For your production instances, we'll be able to migrate those keys. You just take the software, install it on your private cloud, decommission your old appliances, reinstate those keys on that new VMware instance, for instance, and up and running, away you go. So very simple, easy way to migrate across those form factors as necessary. Of course, if you're moving from some software device to a hardware appliance, there's also the cost involved in actually purchasing that hardware appliance. But beyond that, the keys are easily transferable, the licenses are easily transferable between multiple form factors. We also have a brand new form factor that we are currently rolling out, and currently it's in beta, our SaaS offering called Appify. That is actually an extra offering that we have right now. Like I said, it's currently in beta. It's not actually for production at this point in time. We're hoping to make that change and move it into production sometime, hopefully this year. But right now, we encourage you to go out there, sign up for an account, and just kick the tires, see what you think. Give us some feedback. Help us realize, the gaps that we need to close before we can make that a production-ready service for you.
And that's at apify.co.
Correct.
Apify.co.
Best place to find the information all about Appify.
So we actually sent out a survey to you guys with our last email, and we have some interesting responses back, so I thought maybe we should talk about those a bit. So the first question we asked was business priorities for requiring an API management solution. And the clear leader seems to be cloud integration, which is interesting. So cloud integration is certainly important. As Dana mentioned, cloud and mobile are the two kind of biggest drivers for these API management solutions. And so we offer very easy connectivity to cloud solutions like Salesforce, to various different platforms, whether it's AWS or Google Apps, et cetera. Following a close second, it looks like, was external developer ecosystems and enabling internal developers. So we've got both internal and external. It's a broad audience on the phone today.
Yeah, one of the things to realize, and I'm just going to jump in for a second, Jamie, is that internal developers tend to be, traditional developers. They're working with SOAP services, and that whole external, how do I expose this externally to make my APIs more open, tends to be based on REST-based APIs. So, one of the key value props we provide here is that you can do both through one single solution. So being able to work with all of your SOAP services, expose those in the portal, make those only available to your internal developers. So in other words, privacy around those APIs so that they're only seen by internal developers versus those REST-based APIs that you want your partners, third-party developers, external entities to see, being able to expose those in a more public manner, and yet still have that fine-grained control over who can access which of those APIs in what ways, and that's really the value prop here. So one single solution can manage all those internal developers across multiple business units, whether those business units want to manage their own APIs separately, that's all possible. And then another initiative where you expose APIs out to the general public, and it's all through that same interface, all through that same solution, really lowering those costs, lowering those overheads, lowering those maintenance associated with that kind of initiative.
That's great. Thanks, Dana. Okay, question number 2, what importance would you place on the following security considerations? So we talked about a few different security, pieces of security functionality, and the overwhelming favorite here is data privacy and integrity. It's 83%. That was the most important. So certainly this is something that's key, especially when you're transitioning from a SOAP-based infrastructure to more external APIs. With SOAP, you have WS Security, you have built-in encryption and digital signature mechanisms, and those aren't really there with APIs. The most common form of API security is still kind of pure SSL. So we have ways of encrypting that data if you want. We have ways of using HMAC signatures and some of the less common but still popular ways of defining integrity and privacy for APIs. Another is API data and interface security. So obviously everybody wants to have that interface protected, and availability assurance. So we talked about kind of how our platform scales and provides failover in case there's any downtime on a particular gateway. You have anything to add there, Dana?
No, it's pretty comprehensive. I think you've covered it mostly there, Jamie. Do you have any other results from that survey?
Yeah, these are really interesting. So for your current and planned IT initiatives, which of the following are the most important features of an API management solution? The favorite here seems to be data integration and analytics. So this is definitely a clear focus for us. We provide lots of out-of-the-box functionality around analytics targeted to particular users, so the developers can see how their applications are running. The API owners can see both how their APIs are running in particular applications, as well as which developers are making them money. So you can kind of do the back-end business case around your APIs and around how you want to invest in future APIs. We also offer several ways to get data out to big data analytics platforms, to various different reporting and graphing platforms in order to produce reports in the way that you are currently familiar with and happy with. The other two, it looks like there's a tie for second, advanced SLA controls. So we provide API plans. There's some default ones, and you can define exactly what those API plans mean to you. And within there, you can determine what the transaction rate can be, what the long-term quota can be, what time of day and day of week. So it makes it very easy for even a non-technical business user to get in there and define your SLAs and then have those enforced at runtime. And then the other is mobile performance optimization. So for that, we have a product called the Mobile Application Gateway that's dedicated to optimizing performance around mobile use cases. So that involves compression, that involves aggregation of multiple back-end calls, so the communication between the mobile phone and the gateway is less chatty, because the more chatty the interaction pattern is, the more battery you use on your mobile phone, and so you want to optimize that. We provide support for streaming protocols like WebSockets for use in HTML5 applications, for instance. So there's lots of optimizations around those mobile phone use cases, and that seems to be important to you guys. And then next question is about deployment. So 83% said that they would prefer an on-premise deployment, and then the rest are kind of scattered around SaaS, public cloud, hybrid deployment, and managed service. So by far, it looks like our enterprise customers are looking to deploy on-premise so that you own your developers, you own that access to your services, and you can protect the applications where they live. And for a large part, that's still in the enterprise data center. We can deploy in the cloud if your applications live there, but a lot of our customers are still, they have existing systems that they're trying to expose externally now.
Yeah, I was going to just echo that, Jamie, the fact that that's pretty consistent with the sort of 80-20 breakdown of our existing customers. That's the kind of sort of thing we see right today, which is, most of our customers do want to deploy on-premise. One of the key factors here is, though, starting to deploy a hybrid model. So, when you have that capacity that you need to ramp up quickly, some of our customers have actually started deploying our AMIs up in AWS. So, when it comes around to certain times of the year when you have a spike in demand, being able to deflect that spike up into AWS, quickly spin up some AMIs, use those to handle that overflowing capacity, that's been a key piece of flexibility that's allowed them to address some of those bottlenecks that have come up before, and in a much more graceful, much more cost-effective way than they've been able to do it before.
And I think the last question I want to share is, what importance would you assign the following considerations when selecting an API management vendor? So this is kind of how you prefer to make your selection. POCs, recommendations from analysts, free trials, feature breadth, press sentiment, and again, overwhelmingly, the rating is the highest for feature breadth. And so that's great for us. We've got the deepest and broadest set of features in the market today around API management, so certainly that makes me happy. As Dana mentioned, we've certainly been recognized by the analysts, and we love to do POCs because we win every time, but really it's all about the functionality that we can provide to you. Were there any other questions in the chat window?
Looks like we're slowing down, and we're coming up to the top of the hour. So if you've got any more questions left, guys, please go ahead, type it in. We'll get to it right now. And if not, you can always send it to us afterwards. We'll reply directly back to you guys' email. We'll just give you a couple of minutes, and if not, I'd like to thank you all for attending. And we'll go ahead and wrap things up. So thanks, everybody, for coming today, and look forward to that email coming and those Forrester analyst reports that you'll be able to download and have a look at. So thanks all for coming, and that's all for us today. So for myself, Dana Crane, thanks, and Jamie.
Thanks, everybody.